Every conversation is a quest for insight. Brought to you by Redemption Studios. I am Eli. I will be our main host tonight. I'm joined with Jericho Kean.
Hello there.
Before we get into it, our episode has a sponsor tonight. So Jericho, want to take that away?
Yes. Have you ever been camping and you hear
Always.
something in the woods and you think it might be a Sasquatch? Well, I have the product for you. Squatch Away. You can buy it. They have a website, squatchaway.com. If you use the discount code NOTG10, you'll get 10% off discount on your order for Squatch Away. One spray and he's away. So that'll be in the description. You can check out the link to the website. Get your Squatch Away for 10% off and support the show. So yeah, also another note before we get into the episode, leave reviews on the show because that helps us out being able to continue making this. So leave reviews, let us know your thoughts. And if there's any topics you want us to cover, you can also leave that on the show. I believe on most platforms you can comment or leave some kind of review. So be sure to do that if you enjoy the show.
If you don't like the show, don't comment. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, if you don't like the show, then you can go somewhere else.
Yeah, I just
Find
don't.
Something else.
Don't waste my time. Alrighty, so gonna kind of interview you today, so the viewers know who you are. I got some questions for you. All right, it's kind of the first thing.
You like pre-prepared.
I pre-prepared this. Yes, I did.
I did not last time. At least not very well. I had a general idea, but not very prepared of one.
So kind of like just, I guess, first topic within the fantasy realm. What was your very first exposure to it?
That's a good question. Are we talking like fantasy specific or medieval?
You can go both, whichever one came first.
All right, let's see. Gonna take a trip back down memory lane. So
that was like 55 haircuts ago.
Yes, more than that probably. When I was young, I was homeschooled with some of my friends, Basilio and Forrest. You've met both of them. Maybe the audience will at some point. When we were homeschooled, I remember often, we would always, play with toys we had. They specifically had this like wooden castle set thing with all these action figure like toy knights, and we would play with that a lot of the time. So that was kind of my introduction to medieval. Another thing we used to watch, I don't know if you remember this, Redwall. There's books, and it was a cartoon about like different animals. I think the main character was like a mouse that was a knight, and it was like a medieval fantasy through like animals cartoon. I think that was probably my first exposure. As far as like fantasy, there was also this, I forget what the show was called, but it was this medieval show about a red-headed girl with a dragon or something, and it was like at the time,
I know what you're talking about.
I remember it seeming really realistic when I was growing up, but like seeing it later in life, I'm like, it's actually like a PS2 game. But that was another show. If anybody knows the name of it, let us know what it is, because I don't remember it. So those are like, I guess, my childhood introductions. Obviously, the biggest like memorable thing is Lord of the Rings. Briefly, we kind of mentioned before. Got into Lord of the Rings through the Lego sets because I was into Legos. And a lot of the medieval and like pirate Legos I got into right off the bat. I don't know, I've always kind of liked medieval things and pirates. But through that, I was introduced to Lord of the Rings. My family had all of the movies, watched them, became obsessed pretty quickly. So that was my first big like fantasy introduction.
Now, as far as like fantasy and interest go, that wasn't always the case, at least business wise, with Redemption Studios. The earlier history of the channel was more Doctor Who fan base and more not super genre. In the later years, it kind of became that way, more Star Wars too. So, kind of where did the culture shift hit for that?
So funny enough, so I'm gonna take this way back. So when I started doing film, when I got an interest in film for the first time, it was actually through my friend Grant, who he and I would hang out and we would make Lego stop motion films. Typically, they were just stupid, like full of memes and just cringe. Um, but we did those for a while, and actually, it was around the same time when I first got into Lord of the Rings, and the first like movie I wanted to make, it was me. I was probably 13, 12 or 13 at the time. Me and some of my friends at youth group were like, "All right, we're gonna make our own Lord of the Rings fan film," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be Legolas or whatever it was." And we were trying to come up with who was gonna play what character. Eventually, somewhere in there, we scrapped the Lord of the Rings fan film, and the Armor of God was the idea. Um, it was an idea that I had, obviously inspired from the Bible, but I wanted to make a medieval fantasy movie based on the Armor of God, um, in the way that like Tolkien was inspired by the Bible. But
Now, that was
I was
the
I
that
was
was the
13.
Huntsman, right? Was that the
So that was
Huntsman?
actually I'll get to that.
Okay.
So the original Armor of God I made when I was 12. I don't know if you have seen it. There
I've seen parts of
is
it.
3 of them. So we made those. We were very young. They were really bad. And then after Armor of God, I made 2 films. Actually, I might have one of them right here out of the shot. Let me try to grab it for the cringe factor. Uh, where is it?
Also, just so the viewers at home know, Jericho's
This.
chair is sprayed with Squatch Away. So if there's ever a
This
Sasquatch on that,
is Book of Journeys. This is me right here
it's
on
high
the
quality
cover.
editing.
And some of my friends. I remember I didn't have Photoshop, so we took pictures in front of a green screen, and I used my video editor to layer the video files and basically screenshot them, to get that poster. So Book of Journeys was the second thing, which was, I guess, my first original fantasy thing. Being as original as it was, it very much copied a lot of other things. One of them being I think the city was the kingdom from the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything. I think I used the same name. Um, so there's lots of things that were just copied, but that was the closest like original project. Uh, I didn't start a YouTube channel until later. I got into Doctor Who when I was in high school with some of the same friends that also got into it that had already been doing movies with me for a while. So we're like, and I had seen there was a lot of people making Doctor Who fan films, and the nature of the show being the Doctor regenerating into different people, it kind of was a cool premise for a fan film because you could make your own version of the character without like you could have the freedom to do your own character within an already existing character, if that makes sense. Um, so we started doing that, and that's when I started the YouTube channel. Was when I started doing Doctor Who. So that is kind of what the channel started with. But technically, I started filmmaking with fantasy. So after doing Doctor Who, we started doing the Han Solo project, which is still being edited because it is a huge project. And then in college, I had a project to make a short film basically as a final project instead of like a test. It was to make a short film, and then there's the film festivals. So I was like, it'd be cool to make the Armor of God again. And I always kind of wanted to redo it or like dip back into the roots of doing fantasy and stuff. So that's where the Huntsman came from. That was I talked to Grant a little bit. We both kind of came up with some ideas. We actually made a teaser trailer for the Armor of God a couple years before we made that first episode, or pilot, I guess. So
Nice.
we talked about the Huntsman as a character idea, and kind of tossed that around, and then you were brought on to help with that project, which was cool. That was that your first, or was it Han Solo?
I helped briefly with Armor of God, but then Han Solo was like when I really got into it. That was first like major project.
I remember Shane was actually on Armor of God because he made the armor, and we actually got shots of him wearing it and like do it for the prologue at the beginning of the episode.
Nice.
He was one of the Krells as well. So yeah, so I know I got a few more people than we normally had, and that was the first project we actually kind of started casting and like reaching out to local actors outside of our friend group. So we did that more so in Han Solo, but yeah, so that was kind of, as you asked, like how did the genre shift? It really kind of just shifted back to what it originally was. Also, The Witcher came out, and I was getting into that. So my interests will often influence the interest of said films that I want to make.
Which kind of based on your channel wise, a lot of it kind of did the same, but Doctor Who for sure had a dominant presence viewership wise. Like your one Doctor Who comprehension has almost 6,000 views. So kind of you definitely tapped into a fan base there for sure, which I guess Redemption Studios is not solely Doctor Who, but it's definitely one of your most predominant fan bases.
Mm-hmm. And that's a huge community already, especially in the fan film community. There's a huge Doctor Who fan film community. And I've made a lot of friends through that community. Luke, he actually came and filmed with us for a couple things, and
broke our camera. I love you, Luke, but you broke our camera.
We didn't fix it though. We did get it fixed.
We did. I love you, but you
broke our camera.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
So you tap into a lot of different fantasy genres. You got Doctor Who. We even had like a Lego short film in there with Maldar. So kind of fitting where Lance and Derek fits into all that.
Oh man, this is a fun story. I wish Forrest was here for this. So really funny. I'll give the whole kind of backstory for Lance and Derek. So me and Forrest, he was one of the ones that was homeschooled with me for some reason, and I can't explain to you why. Growing up, the funniest thing in the world to us was bald men with mustaches. I don't know why. It was just like Dr. Phil comedy gold. I don't know what it was. That was just our weird sense of humor. So Derek was basically, me and him were hanging out, and his mom was watching some cop show. And there was a character on the cop show that we thought was funny, and his name was Derek. So we're like, all right, Derek. And that's what my character was kind of based on originally. Lance, on the other hand, is much more of a interesting one. So Forrest and his family were on this trip, I think, to Montana, and they were at a natural park, like one of the state parks. There was a park ranger named Lance who really was not in good shape, and apparently he like ran a mile the wrong way to try to help their mom, and then had to run back because he went the wrong way. And there was this whole thing of Lance always going the wrong direction, which we kind of put into the show if you catch it in like the first couple episodes. Whenever something's happening, he typically ends up going the wrong way. And it was this really dumb like thing that Forrest came back and told me about. And we're like, all right, this is a funny character. And I think we kind of just like wanted to make a funny movie anyways. So we're like, all right, these are the characters. Um, Something we actually did. Um, I mentioned the Armor of God being like my first movie. There was a couple small things that we never really finished, quote unquote, or like put on any like YouTube or showed to anybody. Like there's a probably like 10, 15 other like 2 to 5 minute short films I did between the ages of like 12 and now that never really saw the light of day. One of them, a lot of them was just me in Forest and them just running around with a camera doing stupid, like making stupid stuff. Um, Seinfeld was another big inspiration. Love that show still.
It's the best show of all time.
We wanted to do. I agree. We wanted to do something funny. Um, and those characters we just came up with basically on the spot based on funny stories or things we saw. And that whole show kind of just came out of nowhere, but it was fun. It was kind of also like a fun side project to work on because me and Forrest could hang out over a weekend and knock out an episode.
Nice.
Funny enough, that show's actually connected to the Doctor Who fan films. There was an episode where one of the characters ran into Lance and Derek, and it was kind of like a joke that they're in the same universe, and that I'm just wearing a mustache as Derek, but like they didn't notice that we look the same.
That's awesome. Now, as far as like Redemption Studios go, you can kind of see throughout your content and stuff. Was there ever more spiritual inspiration behind it? Because one thing that's nice is all of your content's family friendly. Anyone can watch it.
Yeah.
And kind of
yeah.
with the name too. So kind of go more into that as well.
So one of the biggest things getting me into filmmaking. So it started with the Arbor of God when I was in middle school. It was actually a youth leader who made films, kind of did the same thing as me growing up. He didn't go into it as a profession, but he made his own movies with his friends in high school. So he kind of mentored me in it a little bit. So he actually helped a lot. He was always filming with us. He had the equipment, the editing stuff. He actually gave me like a bunch of his swords and stuff afterwards because he let us borrow a lot of his stuff to do the movies. And that was always like, I guess that spiritual mentorship was cool. And that really influenced just my desire to make films in general. And like the first project being Armor of God. It was always something, I guess the spiritual side was always something that was ingrained into it. I believe that God gives everybody gifts, and I believe that storytelling in some way is mine, or at least part of what I'm passionate about. So the original name actually was Not So Amazing Studios, which some people, Luke, still nag me for changing it. Because it was very much iconic when I started doing the Doctor Who stuff. The Not So Amazing Studios intro was on the original episodes. And that kind of, the channel kind of gained an audience with that name. But as I got older and I kind of wanted to take things a bit more seriously, I was like, maybe Not So Amazing Studios isn't the most professional name. And it's probably not the best name. There was also a point in my life where I was really just trying to do films like all the time, and it was like my focus, and it probably became a little bit of a distraction. So there was a phase where I kind of just set it before the Lord. I'm like, hey, this is a desire I believe that you gave me, so laying it back before the Lord. And it seemed like it was something that he was wanting me to do. So I was praying about it. I was thinking about a new name. I've always kind of liked the idea of redemption. that was like, not only is it like being, I guess, redeemed, obviously, the turning around oneself to being a better version of themselves or being redeemed in Christ, being a big theme in my life, as in most believers' lives. So the idea of redemption in that sense was um, inspiring. So I felt like that was the name, Redemption Studios. All right, let's dig deeper into this. Redemption, one of the definitions I found for it was so to be redeemed, to be made clean, stuff like that, to be pure, to purification. But it also means uh, to do that which one was created to do. So, like, to fulfill what you were created to do, fulfill your destiny, that type of thing. And I really felt like storytelling was what I was created to do. So it kind of just fit right along with that. Redemption Studios, doing what you were created to do. So that's where that came from. And then going on to making the logo, another layer to it, the RS, the Norse, like the Viking letter or runes that look like the R and the S. I don't remember the names of them, but I know the R meant journey and the S meant wholeness, which kind of went along with the journey to wholeness or redemption, the journey
Yeah,
to fulfill what oneself was made to do. So it all just kind of fit together like a puzzle, and it just like I was like, yeah, this is it.
nice. Now with that too, I know you know you're not the only person to kind of do the same thing to the sense of where being a Christian filmmaker. I know you have different contacts as well.
Hmm. And the thing for me is like I'm sure most people that have seen a lot of big Christian movies know that they are oftentimes bad or cheesy because it seems very like I don't know. I feel like a lot of times it's a pastor trying to make a movie, not a filmmaker trying to make a movie, which awesome to them. Like I respect it, but I think there is a difference between somebody who is a storyteller making a film with Christian moral slash biblical inspiration than someone who is actually a pastor who's trying to make a film. And I think that there's a balance there. So I feel like my thing is, yes, I'm a believer and I want to infuse that into my projects. I don't want it to be like overdone, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So kind of
I
even go.
want I want everybody to be able to enjoy my stuff, but obviously I want to infuse it with those things
Absolutely.
to possibly help somebody who might need uh, that kind of guidance or whatever.
Our kind of, at least for me, with you, my first exposure to kind of seeing that done was Ford Studios. And our first experience seeing the Fellows Hip film, great movie. Um, and then that kind of became a source of inspiration for you as well too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
kind of how did that develop? How did you find that and stuff?
So really funny how we discover the fellowship. Grant, who I've mentioned a couple times, he found the movie at a gas station and thought it was a like Lord of the Rings ripoff. So he bought it thinking it was going to be this like funny thing to make fun of. And we watched it and we actually were like, okay, this is actually kind of a good movie. Um I was like, yes, it's definitely memeable and there's qualities of it that are funny, but overall the movie was relatable as a Lord of the Rings nerd, as a game nerd, as somebody who plays D&D, and I feel like it aged in a way that it's like, all right, it almost kind of predicted the culture that was happening in that community. And I liked it. Um, Grant pointed out to me Ron Newcomb, the guy who's directed it, who acted in it as one of the characters. Um, I kind of reached out to him on social media because I liked what he did. I thought it was cool. He also did the Rangers film. And he actually was very like chill and like, would talk to me and stuff. I actually interviewed him on an old video on one of my old channels. Hopefully we'll be able to get him back on here soon on this show to actually talk more about his studio. But really cool guy, Christian guy who kind of he's over the past couple of years he's helped me kind of with filmmaking. Very kind. Sometimes I'll just message him like, "Hey, this is the project I'm working on. What do you think about this?" And through him, we found Weekend Warrior because he was heavily involved in the creation of that. So that was, but my introduction was kind of funny. Something that we thought was going to be this inside joke and then became like this really cool person that I got to meet through it.
That's awesome. Now, kind of to build on that too, with going to Weekend Warrior, stuff like that, kind of like 2 years ago with your channel, you introduced Maldar Durlin first time as a character. So kind of where did that all start from and to where it is now?
So, all right, buckle up for the next 2 hours. No, so the character came out of a want to create something original, which is really ironic when I explain it more, from it kind of being just a Geralt ripoff at one point. But after doing Doctor Who fan films for so long, I'm like, I want to do something original. Yes, the Armor of God is original, but I want to make a fantasy character because one of the things was I had a character in the original Armor of God, but for the new one, I kind of was like, I kind of want to take a back seat and be a director for this. So if and when we end up doing more Armor of God movie stuff, I will be director, producer. I won't actually play a character. I might play a small part in it, but not a large role. And I have always been into just creating like stories and worlds. I actually kind of took a lot of the stuff from the Book of Journeys movie that I made in high school. This thing, because I made a map for that, and I actually kind of, when I was starting to rewrite the Armor of God, I was like, all right, instead of making this just like straight biblical whatever, I'm gonna make this more of a fantasy world that has its own biblical parallels, more like what Tolkien has created. And I thought of the idea of different time periods, and like, so there's the era of the Armor of God, which Lord of the Rings would be like the first or second age, but like what happens after that? And I kind of had the idea, hugely inspired by The Witcher, the idea of like, all right, the Dark Lord's defeated, but there's still a lot of darkness lingering in the world. This character, Maldar, is part of a group called the Blaze Keepers, who are this group of monster hunters, knights, paladins, warriors that keep the flame of Elion, which is the god, going. And it's their job to fight off the darkness that still lingers in the world. The character of Maldar, specifically, huge inspiration from Will Turner from Pirates of the Caribbean. That was one of the original inspirations for the character. Geralt being another big one. A really big inspiration for the character, and where I got part of the backstory, was actually, if you've seen The Last Kingdom, the character Uhtred from that show. He was a Viking who was actually English, but during like the Viking invasion, he was kind of adopted by the Vikings because his father was killed, and he's actually this lord of a kingdom, but because he was raised by Vikings, nobody really wants to give it to him, even though it's his. So my kind of backstory for Maldar, with his father being killed at a young age, he was raised by his uncle who was a Viking. Kind of came from that. And then as he got
Nice.
older, he kind of discovered like, oh, my father was a monster hunter. And more so now I'm kind of shifting less monster hunter, more paladin, kind of in between, because I think both could be kind of a cool combination. So I'm still working on that story, even now. But the character came from that. D&D was the first time I got to use the character. So
And
take it back
continue to use the character.
continue to use the character. As I said,
For context, every campaign he's been in the last 3 years has been a variant of Maldar.
that's not completely true, but it's mostly true.
Like 98%. Or I think there was like one
98%.
time.
Well,
I think it was it the Were Rabbit one you didn't play Maldar? That was like Jack,
I did not.
wasn't it?
I did not play that. Yeah, I was Jack
That-
Harrington, which was
and that was
based on Steve
from Stranger Things. But that was it.
Pretty much, yeah. The first D&D campaign, I rolled up Maldar as a barbarian. So in that being raised by Vikings part of the character arc, I died the first session. I drowned in a river, and the DM didn't let me roll death saves because apparently he wanted to teach us that the characters could die before introducing death saves. I was a little triggered by that one when I found out death saves were a thing.
Oh shoot, I remember that. That was like old timey. Yeah.
That was like the first, because that wasn't even a campaign. That was like a one shot that I think went 2 sessions.
Was that the one outside Zach's house?
I think it started at Zach's house, and then we started playing.
It ended in your basement. Yeah, it ended in your
Yeah.
basement. Shoot.
Yeah. Because we tried to play outside, and then it started raining, and we all ran inside and played on the floor in the basement because we didn't have a table yet.
That's why outside D&D is cursed.
It
just doesn't. For
but I changed
context,
the
every
character
single
name.
time bad.
I changed the. Actually, no, it was. Okay, now I'm trying to remember. Maldar wasn't introduced until the campaign after the one shot, because the one shot, I think I still played a barbarian, but it was
That
a
was
different
Astrid.
name. I think it was Astrid Stormclaw, yeah.
Then you roll that over.
And then I rolled that over later. I eventually, in the lore, made that Maldar's uncle who raised him.
Yeah. Because
but-
Side Shot, Weekend Warrior, our first one, Weekend Warrior 5, that was your first character name.
Yep. So I guess I'm
Which
trying
I
to.
think all of us changed it after the first year because
We did. All of
Jacob-
us did.
I had the only valid excuse. Everyone else changed it. I had a very valid excuse, which I covered last episode.
Yes.
I died.
Yeah, but other people had my name, so
That's fair. That was valid.
Jacob just didn't like Chadwick anymore. Apparently.
Okay.
Which is fair.
Twitter.
It's not the biggest medieval sounding
Commit to the
name.
bit.
Commit to the bit. But yeah, Maldar Durlin was the name generator name, basically. Maldar and Durlin were 2 names I got from that, and I'm like, oh, these sound cool together. This is the character. Rolled him up. He died the first session. And then I changed it to Moondar Blaze as like the second character because Maldar died. So I actually played as Moondar through that campaign, but technically it was Maldar. Let's see. When I was DMing, my whole plan for being a dungeon master was to kind of establish my world that I started making for the Armor of God. So all my campaigns have been set in that world. Therefore, characters that exist in that world, aka Maldar, have shown up as an NPC in multiple campaigns, kind of connecting things, which is where the stigma of Maldar being in every campaign has come from. Even if I haven't played him as a character because I'm the dungeon master, he has always been an NPC. The first time I got to actually play Maldar fully as a character was in your campaign that you started 3 years ago now, and I'm still playing him, which is quite fun. And as I kind of said last episode, your campaign has hugely influenced the character, and I think helped me kind of put the character into like to take an idea and make it into a character. Yes, I had the idea for Maldar. I did the Lego stop motion thing, I think, pretty early on with the character concept. And then through your campaign, I started playing the character. And that's kind of where he came from. And then eventually went into Weekend Warrior, which we can get
Nice.
into more, but I'll take a break from talking for a minute.
So kind of to summarize here, with Redemption Studios now, what is your current, like, what does the next 5 years look like for the channel?
The next 5 years, Han Solo hopefully will be released in the next 5 years. We will hopefully still be doing this podcast because I enjoy it. I think it's a easier thing for us to be able to make and actually produce. That takes a little bit less time to make. I would like to make an Armor of God film / series. That's kind of the next big thing after Han Solo. And that's something I'm still writing. I'm also kind of writing a book in that world. The book isn't necessarily Armor of God. It's more just a collection of stories in that world setting. Maldar being one of those characters and kind of his story throughout it. Kind of like how the first Witcher book was written.
Nice.
So yeah, that's kind of my goal. I don't like to set like. I have goals, but I don't have like a list. Like I do, but I don't, because I don't want to set. I don't want to like set something in my mind and be like, all right, I'm doing this, and then it doesn't happen. So I don't like to announce everything, but I also want to follow where the Lord leads and whatever happens. I think I've found a lot of other things that kind of exercise my creativeness. One of those being D&D, the other being Weekend Warrior. I'm still able to kind of use those storytelling passions in those things.
Nice.
On a more consistent basis. Because, we grow up, we get jobs, we have to pay the bills and support our expensive hobbies, and being an independent filmmaker on YouTube isn't always the most financially stable.
Oh, that's for sure. Still waiting on my paycheck.
Hey, when I get one, I'll definitely get you one. Sponsor us.
Please. So kind of to wrap up here, I guess what would be your biggest advice or piece of information you've learned for anyone else wanting to do this, an aspiring filmmaker wanting to get their start?
Just do it.
That's copyright, and we can't use that slogan. We're not using that slogan. Don't sue us. That was just a sentence.
That was a sentence. Yeah, really, just like, don't be afraid to fail. Try it out. If you have an idea, try to make it happen. You won't know until you do it. And a huge piece of advice, especially doing YouTube, you're going to have a lot of really bad videos before you start making good ones. But that's just part of the process. That's part of learning. So don't be afraid to make those mistakes. Try to reach out to people. Try to make connections, because you can't make a film by yourself. It's kind of hard. But yeah, definitely my thing, hold it here, hold it loosely before the Lord, if that's your belief. I believe that, if you're created to do something, you're gonna do it. So, if that's film, awesome. If it's something else, that's awesome too. But definitely don't be afraid to try it. Um, any idea can be done. So just go for it.
Awesome. Well,
Don't
as
use Maldar though.
yes, copyright. TBD. Copyright.
Copyright.
All right. Well, I am out of questions. We're about out of time as well.
Yes.
So, thank you all for tuning in for the second episode of Nightly Chatter. And we will catch you guys on the third one.